Hi, I'm Cher Kaufmann. Welcome to the Drawing Desk. I've heard back from many of you who have been working with my smaller book series, Peace, Love, Dream, Gratitude, Joy, and did I get them all? I think I got them all. So you each have different personalities that are within these books. And what's fun about these little books is that they let you have a different kind of creativity than if you were working with a larger page book this way. So I thought I would create a small series of videos just for you with working with small books. Today I'm going to be working with Dream. Now I have a couple of pages that I've already worked with, and obviously the one thing that I think most of us are really comfortable working with is colored pencils. And they're very easy to work with, and you can use solvents, and I have videos that show you how to work with that. But I thought for these smaller books I wanted to show you something that might be a little bit what people normally try to avoid, which is kind of the quirky things that I like to look for. Is if we have a problem with something, how can we make it work to our advantage? And you may have already done this on your own with other coloring books, but I want to just remind you that you don't have to be sort of that straight line with all the things that you do. Sometimes you can do the mirror image or the opposite of what you would normally do and have a lot of fun with that. So when I'm working, I like to take my pages out of my book normally. I really encourage a lot of movement with my books. These books do have perforated pages, so it makes it easy for me to rip them out. Now this page here, out of Dream, I did use water-based markers with that, and I have a different video that will talk to you about water-based markers. That's not actually what this video is going to be on, but you can look for that video itself. But it is a really wonderful way to create an impression through the paper onto the back. And that's what I've chosen to do, is that I found particular pages that have these wonderful quotes on the back sides that don't have anything on the page, which means that I can have my own sense of creativity of whether I leave that page blank or whether I do something with it, whether I doodle and draw or whether I color. Well, in this instance, I purposely chose to allow some of those colors from the water-based markers to come through the paper and leave impressions. Now these two here I've actually already done the coloring on. I used the impression of the water marker coming through and used colored pencil on top of that. But I haven't done this one, and I left it blank so that you can see how much of an impression was left there and how much it will change when I begin to add my colored pencils to it. So I've limited my coloring pencils to just what I pulled out from another video that I did before. And sometimes this works as a personal challenge to me, just to see, can I work with a limited number of colored pencils? But it also allows me to blend my colors together if I want to get something unique that way, or brighten with just what I have. So for me, I'm just limiting to what I had left over from this other video. But if you have particular colors in mind, please go get them. Go and do whatever's going to bring you the most joy with your coloring. So for me, what the things that I'm seeing here, the first with this is I'm seeing this pink. So I'm going to begin here, and I'm going to add some of this pink color in. And I'm not doing a lot of pressure because I really like this sort of whimsical, sketchy kind of look that's coming through, where there's some darker areas and then there's a lot of the white of the paper that comes through. Since this book is Dream, I like the idea that there are some dreamy aspects to anything that I'm working on. And I'm not being particularly careful with a lot of my strokes. You'll notice that normally I would work in very small circles. These are very open. It's just to put a little bit of color down so that I can see my shapes and I can begin to work with them in a different way as I begin to create form out of the impressions of the water marker. Okay, so I'm going to begin to maybe take a little bit of shadow and shading into this now so I can develop my petals a little bit more. And you'll notice that when I am working with these flowers, I don't actually work in one spot totally. I will go back to one area and then come back because I want to create this sort of whimsical look to everything that I'm doing. So I'm actually going to stop there and begin to take some shape to where I see the stem and the leaves of the flower. I like that the way the marker, it has this Well, it's just an impression. I just like that it has an impression because then that lets me add to it as much as I want or as little as I want. Let's see, this is kind of a purple color. When I work this way with, to me it's just more like sketching. I like to be able to see the layers through each other, so I really have a very light touch with all of this. So there's really nothing that is very strong, especially in these initial places. I like to see the overlap of all of it. And I didn't even use any of my blender tools with any of this. There's no solvents involved with any of this. I like this sort of sketchy look. I like the way that the marker is still part of the image, and I didn't want to mess up anything that was on the back. Sometimes when you use solvents, that does soak through the paper, and if you have paper that's a little bit on the thinner side, in other words, this is not 110-pound cardstock, it's a little bit less than that, then anything that you have that's going to be a wet medium is going to go through. So you want to create this as sort of a light touch. Remember, this is sort of a dreamy space. Anytime that you want to create a kind of a brown look, but you don't have a brown, if you know anything about color theory, if you do sort of the opposite, so purple and yellow are opposites, so if I want this to have a little bit browner look, I'm going to add a little bit of purple on top of my yellow, and it will give it kind of a shaded look to it. Yeah, just a little bit of depth to that space. And I want a little bit of yellow reflected in this. Add a little pressure here. And I kind of like that this is a very loose technique. In other words, there's nothing about perfection that's about this project. There really is a sort of letting go in being able to work with a mirror image. It's not meant to look like the first page. It's not meant to look like what you started with. It's the impressions that are left behind. I don't know if you've ever worked with flower where you take petals of a flower and then you do flower pressings and you press it down, and the impression that's left from the flowers is of course nothing like the original flower. It's just where the pigment and the dye of those petals go. So it's one of those types of things. It's the impression that is being left behind, and then your imagination gets to fill in the rest of that. Okay, now what I did here, I did a very, very, very light, and you'll notice I'm doing, these are just Crayola, and I think maybe I've got a Prismacolor in here. I think I got one Prismacolor, but most of these are just Crayola that I'm working with. So in other words, you don't have to have anything fancy in order to work with your coloring pages. Work with what you have access to. Make it fun. Okay, I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm actually kind of happy with where it is right now. I think it's very interesting that this has the stronger marker and that these two here are more of a pencil mark. And And if you want to just see, as a reminder of what it looked like from here, it's very different. They have very different feels. And so if I wanted to, I could get another color, or I could continue to work with what I have, and I could add a little bit more whimsy in the background if I wanted to, or I could just leave it just the way it is. For me, I'm just going to leave it just the way it is right now and just enjoy it, just as the impression that it is. I hope you have fun. Until next time, may you find more color in your day.